Okay, welcome back to the Daily Mastermind. My name is George Wright III with your daily dose of inspiration, motivation, and education. We're really excited today. We've got a great guest speaker. Before I introduce my good friend Don Pendleton, I want to give you the quote of the day from the Daily Mastermind mobile app, and it's by George Herbert. And the quote is, "Skill and confidence are an unconquered army. Skill and confidence are an unconquered army." So great quote, great quote. So today we have a Prosperity Report interview with Don Pendleton, who's the co-owner of Protect Wealth Academy. They conduct 3-day summits for the high net worth investor and actually for just about everybody around the country. And their events fill up really fast, but it's the longest running event of its kind. So let me just tell you a little bit about Don real quick, because I've known him for, it's probably, has it been maybe 20 plus years now, Don?
It is.
Good night, man.
We're getting old.
Time goes, right? So everyone on this call or everyone on this episode is going to be really excited because Don is an expert in the area of lawsuit protection, tax reduction, and estate planning. He's been doing this for over 20 years, but he's also a contributing author to some best-selling books like 7 Legal Tools Made Easy, America's Greatest Tax Secrets Revealed, and the Asset Protection Handbook, which I've talked about in previous episodes. But he's personally coached and assisted thousands of individuals implementing asset protection strategies, helping them save millions of dollars. And like I mentioned a minute ago, I've known Don for quite some time, and he's a good friend, but he's an expert in the area that we're going to be talking about today. So Don, thanks for being on the Daily Mastermind podcast. Appreciate you being here.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
We have a lot of different things going on, especially with things going on in the economy right now. But I really wanted to have you on because I wanted to hit this topic and this concept of asset protection. I know that as the economy and people get in a little bit more of a fear mode, lawsuits go up, people are looking to save more. And we've talked in the past about how saving money on your taxes and things is one of the safest, simplest, easiest, quickest ways to create wealth. So we don't have a lot of time, but I want to cover some real, just high-level key topics with you today. So the one that I want to kind of bring out before anyone else, just because we're at the beginning of this episode, is, Don, in your experience, do you have to have wealth? Do you have to have assets to really start talking about this concept and benefiting from asset protection, tax strategies, and estate planning? Because I think most entrepreneurs feel like it's not a very big deal until they start to accumulate wealth, and then they want to start to do it. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. And I guess it depends on your definition of wealth. Most people don't consider themselves wealthy. The people that I'm talking to, business owners, they go, well, when I get my first million, then I'll be wealthy. But when they get the first million, they go, yeah, but it's encumbered and but it's not in cash. And, I've got equity, but it's, I'm cash poor. And when I get my second million, then I'll be wealthy. And what I find is that nobody really considered, until they're mega millionaires, they consider themselves wealthy. Mm. But when is the best time to do asset protection? When you've got something to protect. Let's say I've only got $20,000, $30,000 equity in a little rental property. That's my life savings. The fact is, you're the deep pocket in that relationship between you and the renter. You've acquired something that they don't, and you become now a target for a lawsuit. So wealth is, what is wealth? It's really hard to tell. And I've had students come. In fact, I dealt with one earlier this week. She's got a $5,000 brokerage account, which, to most people, most attorneys, they would go, hey, you're not big enough to protect. But for her, that is her life savings. Now, she has a C corporation to manage the investment. She has a Wyoming LLC to own it. And she's got a legal structure that I think is over the top. But for her, that's what she needs to feel comfortable. The problem that I see with most people is that they start too late. And I don't know what wealth is. Yeah. But unfortunately, when do we start teaching? We don't teach this in college. We don't teach it in high school. We don't teach it in the business world. Most attorneys don't understand the basic principles of asset protection. So when do you have to have wealth? No, because wealth is accumulated over a lifetime. And if you don't implement tax strategies and you don't implement lawsuit protection strategies along the way, chances are pretty slim that you'll ever acquire wealth,
Yeah,
however
that's
you
a
define it.
huge, yeah. That's actually one of the things I've learned the most being around you. And as I've talked about before, we've done events all over the world, but all over the country that have had, just thousands and thousands and thousands of people at them and all different walks of life. But number one, these concepts and strategies are just not taught to the average person. That's one of the reasons I really feel strongly about having them on the program. But number two, by knowing these strategies, you clearly can accumulate wealth better, faster, more secure. And I really like the point you made out about how do you define wealth? And, especially with our audience in the mastermind group, people really value education. And so you've got to have that education and you have to define where you are at wealth. But as basically your definition of wealth changes throughout your life, but also your level of wealth changes throughout your life, different strategies come into play and stuff as well. So I really do think that, having it up front, learning along the way is the best way to do it. And I think you hit it right on. You have to clearly define and really it's a perspective too, right? Because you compared to certain people might have more wealth on a financial end than others, but it's always relative to who might potentially sue you, who might potentially have access to what you're doing and how you can benefit. Because even at a low level of, what we define as true net wealth, cash wealth, you still can save and make and increase from taxes, from proper structure and things like that. So I do like your concept of wealth. And I think you've pretty much worked with individuals everywhere from, high net worth to low end and you really all the way in between. There's strategies people can implement, right? I mean, the goal is not you have to have a lot of assets to actually implement the strategies, right?
We can start at the most simple, basic level, even if it's income tax reduction. I can't tell you, George, how many people over the years, hundreds, have come to me and go, well, my attorney says that I don't have enough wealth to really do anything.
Yeah.
I don't have enough money to do a trust. I don't have enough money to do an LLC. Just carry more insurance. I've only got 5 or 6 rental properties. And are you kidding me? It
Mm-hmm.
may not be a lot to that attorney
Mm-hmm.
and relative to the whole world, but for me, this is my life savings. And damn it, I don't want to go back and earn it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's important to me that I protect it and isolate it. Don't go overboard. Be wise, prudent, responsible in your asset protection.
Well,
But
and a lot of
certainly
things you
do something.
do, yeah, there's very few things that you do that are lifetime projects, like growing your wealth. And so this is something you're going to be doing for a lifetime. You better get educated about it, right?
Correct.
Now,
Correct.
I know that you have, generally, when you talk about these concepts of asset protection, tax planning, estate planning, you generally start with estate planning. And so I kind of wanted to have you start there and maybe explain why you start with estate planning, because that's something that, when I think about it, most people do. They think, well, what are you going to do when you die? That's kind of the last thing on the list I need to be worried about. But why do you start with that? And can you give us some ideas on estate planning in particular, where you start and what are the key factors we need to take into consideration with that?
Well, we try really hard to listen to the students and see what's most important to them, or maybe what's urgent. They got 3 rental properties they've just acquired, or they're going to close on an investment property. Well, the most urgent thing for them is to get that structured properly, and don't carry real estate in your name. Or you've got somebody it's the end of the year and we could implement some tax strategies. The most important thing we do right then, or the most urgent thing, is to set up the corporation and try to capture some of those. But if everything is in calm waters,
Mm-hmm.
we almost always want to start with an estate plan. We begin with the end in mind. It's foundational. It's George, picture most everybody in the U.S. has a big popcorn Tupperware bowl.
Okay.
Um, Well, you keep it in the kitchen cabinet somewhere, but you never put it in the cabinet empty. You always put all the little Tupperware bowls inside of it and then stuff it away. That's sort of like your revocable trust. This is your estate plan. Yes, you're going to have a corporation, but the stock of the corporation won't be in your name. It will be in the name of the trust. And if we set up the trust correctly at first, before anything else gets set up, then we don't have to go back and retitle those stock certificates. Yes, you're going to have an interest in a limited partnership or an LLC or maybe multiple LLCs. And although you're going to be the member, really we want to tie that interest down to the trust some way. And if we set up the trust and we set up the estate plan first, then we don't have to go back and retitle that. I helped a lady here a few months ago. Her husband had passed away. She was 38 years old, 4 little kids. He died in a Texas rodeo accident, as I recall. And they're left with this $4 million water drilling company that they owned. Oh, wait, they didn't own, he owned. It was a single member LLC with no connection down to the trust. So now who owns this $4 million water drilling company? Well, it's going to go through Texas probate. And after 9 or 10 or 12 or 15 months of Texas probate, who's now going to own the company? I don't know, but it may not be worth $4 million. It will be likely the wife. So why do we start with the trust and the estate plan? Because we tie everything to that trust, and all his rights and interest should have been tied down to the trust. It would have been a very simple paragraph in the operating agreement. Upon Joe's death, we want all of his rights and interest to this to go to somebody. It could have been to his wife. It could have been to the trust. It could have been to one of the oldest kids. It could have been to anybody. But where that paragraph was never completed, his interest is going to go through probate. So why do we start with the trust? Well, we don't always, but in perfect calm waters, it's foundational.
No, I love that.
I think where we start.
Well, it's interesting because it's a principle, right? And begin with the end in mind. That's not just a principle for success, but it's a principle for wealth. And I think far too many people don't begin with where they want their life to be, what they want their life to be like, where they want to be success-wise. And if you begin with the end in mind, it really is sort of a filter for everything up leading to that. So I do love the idea and the visual of having a Tupperware bowl or a structure that things kind of flow into and fit inside. And I think that's an important strategic way to look at it. But I definitely like that you have to begin with the end in mind. And that is a key principle I think people in general are starting to adopt and learn more of as we talk about it. Because if you begin with the end in mind, all the other pieces make a little more sense rather than what most people do, which is they just, they may not even know why they do it, but they got an LLC and then they're going to try to do this and they try to do that. And it leads them to a road they might have their ladder up against the wrong wall, so to speak. So I really, really like that. Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to begin with the end in mind. We've talked a little bit about estate planning, and just to put a cap on that, it sounds like one of the key tools in estate planning is going to be your trust. And maybe your living will and a couple of other things we can talk about in another episode. Is there anything else key, critical-wise related to estate planning that you want to just kind of point out as a key part of having a good estate plan?
Well, maybe a couple things. First of all, the estate plan will change. It's a revocable living trust. It can be changed. It can be amended. It can be revoked. As kids grow up and as friendships change, and maybe, your son gets into a bad marriage and we want to change or amend, or maybe the grandkids grow up and we want to maybe add a drug clause or add something where maybe things we always want that trust to be amendable, changeable, because frankly life changes. Number 2 is nobody ever wants to do an estate plan because nobody really wants to think about their mortality, and it's not the most urgent thing ever, but it is one of the most important things that we do in life.
Got it.
And another little concept that maybe is important, and that is probate and estate taxes are 100% optional. If we can use the proper tools in a timely fashion, there's no reason anyone should ever have to go through probate or pay estate taxes. We can take anybody's estate. I remember Jackie Kennedy died with a $93 million estate. Zero probate, zero estate taxes. If we can do that on a $93 million estate, we can help almost every one of our clients.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do that. And maybe one last thing that came to mind, and that is most trusts that attorneys set up for you, somewhere to the estimate of 90 to 95% of the trusts that attorneys have set up have never been properly funded, which means even though you paid an attorney to set up a trust so that you can avoid probate, you avoid the public, everything being a matter of public record, the expense, the time, all the negatives of probate. If we don't fund it, meaning we don't put the assets into the trust can't control it. The trust can only control that which you own. And if your bank statement is still coming in your name and not in the name of the trust, well, the trust can't control it. If your home is still in your name and not in the name of the trust, if that property tax, the notice, isn't coming in the name of the trust, then you never adequately funded the trust. And that house will go through probate to get to wherever you want it to go.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Those are some really good points. I'll just kind of remind and reiterate those. Beginning with the end in mind with a trust is key, but you don't have to have it all figured out because it's going to be changeable. Right. The idea of probate and estate taxes is optional. This is something that you've got to focus on and eliminate. And then lastly, it's got to be funded because 90 to 95% of these trusts are not even funded. So I love those concepts. I think those are key pillars when it comes to estate planning. So, okay, so let's shift gears for a minute. And I don't know if you think this is the best way to go, but let's talk about tax planning or tax reduction strategies for just a second, because you have some amazing people that you've partnered with. We've featured on the podcast in the past a former prosecuting attorney for the IRS, Scott Estel, but I love how your take related to how this integrates to your estate plan and asset protection. So what are the key components of tax planning we need to be aware of?
Well, I think the most basic is that we need to take personal responsibility for reducing your taxes. We can't rely on somebody else. I run into so many professionals that go, taxes are too, I just give everything to my accountant. And he just figures out, or she figures out the very best way. You're never going to win the game like that. Picture you going to the dentist every year or two. And we just say, all my dental, I'm just going to leave it up to my dentist. He's the professional. No, we don't do that. We go, I'll have him check, but I'm going to brush my own teeth, and I'm going to floss when I choose to floss, and I'm going to pay attention, and I'll do the daily maintenance, and just have him look over the big stuff. That's the direction we really need to have with our own taxes. You've got to keep your own mileage log. Nobody's going to do that for you. Even if it's an app that you get in the car and you go, yep, this is a business trip, so I'm going to GPS is going to track the mileage. I'm going to keep the receipts. I don't care who does the taxes. That's irrelevant. But the day-to-day thinking about taxes and tax reduction, is this meal a business related? Look at everything that you're spending, and look at it from a different eyes. And if I can't deduct it, the question should be, how can I deduct it? Yeah. But it is not your accountant's responsibility to save you money on taxes. I think the most basic principle of tax reduction is becoming aware, become a little bit knowledgeable, being personally responsible. Then you're looking at the tax situation, the tax game in a whole new light when you take responsibility for it.
Yeah, that is huge. I remember, highlighting this on our past episodes where there's a distinct difference between tax planning and tax preparation. And most people are stuck in that idea that, TurboTax or my accountant or my financial professional is going to do it. But I think this takes it rather than personal planning, right, and taking a proactive role. But I think the point you make about taking personal responsibility is key, because what a lot of people don't realize until it's too late is that they're in the game already. And if you're spending most of your life trying to create wealth, earn a living, make money, support your family, and you're not putting the smallest amount of effort into being proactive and responsible for your own taxes, you're really making it hard on yourself when there's so many things that you can do. And I liked what you said about systems, whether it's just, set up these things, whether it's tracking your mileage or your expenses. I also love your comment about when you start becoming more responsible, you start shifting the way you think. So instead of, well, can I deduct this or not? You're saying, well, how could I deduct it? How could I make this work?
Right.
So I love that proactive, responsible attitude for taxes, because I think it goes without saying that, like I said earlier in the episode, when you save money on your taxes, it's the quickest, simplest way to increase your wealth. And when you start looking at the compounding effect over time, it's a significant amount, whether you like it or not. It's not just, like Bob talked about it in our last couple of times around him. It's not just offense, it's defense as well. So I love that. I love that. Anything else you would add on tax planning or tax reduction?
We've got some great webinars. I've been very, very, very blessed to be surrounded by some of the best tax professionals in the nation. In fact, we'll bring a lot of them to our 3-day summits when we teach. So I've kind of lived by this forever. There are free tax classes in every community in the U.S. Tax information is not hard to find. I remember the very first time I ever took a tax class. It was a free class by H&R Block. But it was tougher than any college class I ever took.
Mm-hmm.
And when I sat down in that class, I noticed that people in the local communities were getting college credit by going to H&R Block. It was that good, and the class was half filled with people that were starting with their new accounting job or starting with a CPA firm or a law firm, and the professionals were sending them to H&R Block for free tax training. They do that. I'm not an advocate of having my taxes done by H&R Block. But I am an advocate for their training because it's free. Every August they teach free. Now what they're hoping to do is that you'll score a 98 or above, and you will, become their next shining employee. Well, I didn't want their job. I just wanted their training to use it back against the IRS. And oh my gosh, that opened my eyes to so many tax trip. You can call it tricks. Or you can call it loopholes or whatever you want to call it, but that's the tax code. And that is the system that we currently have. Whether we agree with it or not, you either learn the game or you're going to get burned by the game.
Yeah, that's the definition of you can either be proactive or it'll get taken from you anyway. So you're going to get affected one way or the other. And I love that. One of the reasons I like the trainings and things that you guys have done at the events is you also, it's not just a boring topic of taxes. It's applicable to situations and case studies and people, whether they're doctors, real estate investors, entrepreneurs. So I really, really love that. So that brings us, and this is great for the amount of time that we have. This brings us to this last topic of asset protection and tying it all together. And so let's talk for a minute about that, because I know a lot of people, it's like insurance, right? People think, well, I'm not going to get sued. I won't need the insurance. Do I need it? Do I not need it? And I think what I've learned from being around you is it's not just about being sued, although that is a huge, huge piece of it. It's literally a way of thinking. It's a way of protecting yourself, your family, others. It's a responsibility that you take when you talk about this concept of asset protection. So why don't we hit that for a minute on asset protection and how it ties together with tax planning and estate planning for the last little bit of our episode here.
Well, I've never been able to teach asset protection without teaching taxes and without teaching estate planning. It all ties together. I think maybe what holds people back there. I think there's a lot of reasons that hold people back because number one, it's not urgent. I've got 20 things I have to get done today, and doing my estate plan is not the top on the list.
Hmm.
But there's another reason I think maybe people don't get started, and that is there's a lot of hype about. We all know people that hid behind entities, and maybe, I'm worried about if I set up an LLC to protect my rental properties, maybe people will think I'm doing something wrong. But you wouldn't think that if we were talking home security. If we went to home security, would you feel, George? Would you feel comfortable putting window locks, door locks, and maybe an alarm system on your house?
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel,
Yeah.
but George, there's homeless people out there that need a place to live. What are you ignoring them by? No, you're not. But you're protecting yourself and your family first.
Mm.
That doesn't absolve you of your responsibility to take care of homeless people, but you have to take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
The same principles apply with asset protection. If you were to set up maybe a corporation that could save you money and you could deduct things that we couldn't deduct, well, that's not overkill. If we do an estate plan so we're not creating a mess for our kids when you leave, that's not overkill. If we separate rental properties from other business activities using LLCs or business entities, that's not overkill. We want you to be wise, prudent, responsible in everything that you do, but we do want you to get started. Um,
Well,
and
and there's so many different ways, right? Because I know that business owners and doctors and real estate investors, stock investors, you talk about asset protection, and I know that that's kind of the category we fit in corporations and LLCs and S corps and family limited partnerships and things like that. But and we'll probably in another episode be able to drill into a little bit more detail. But I know that each of these types of structures have different benefits for tax or benefits for estate planning or lawsuit protection. So where does somebody kind of sort of start? Like where do they start with this?
well, again, we look at I would do a quick assessment. Let's look at the assets that you have.
Mm.
Let's look at the risk involved in your life. Are you a chess player or a motocross? I mean, what's the risk? Do you own business? Are you running nuclear waste between state lines, or you just have a couple rental properties? Do you have brokerage accounts, which are safe, gold and silver? Or, I mean, it really depends. I wish I could give you a direct answer, but I would probably do an assessment and look at the risk of the individual. I'd look at their state homestead protections. I'd look at how much equity they have in properties in real estate. And I'd look at their exposure, and we start with the biggest risk, and we can tie everything into the trust later. Or maybe if everything's in calm water, we start with the trust, we add asset protection, we add some tax strategies in with what we do. If somebody's paying way too much money in taxes and it's the end of the year, we might very well start with income tax reduction strategies. I, I don't have a I don't
No,
have
I
an
think that's a
exact
great
for
answer. I
you.
mean, what I love about that, Don, is and what I was hoping you would say, and I think we've made the point here, is that when it comes to structure, whether it's a business, investing, or things like this, there is no one size fits all structure. I really think a lot of
Right.
entrepreneurs, a lot of investors think, oh, they say you should use an LLC. Oh, I should have an S corp, or hey, I don't want to pay double taxation. What you said, I thought was real critical, and that is you need to look at your assets, your risk level, and maybe even add in there your goals, because I've heard this time and time again from very successful individuals, including like Scott Estel with taxes, where he said, look, you not only need to spend time, be responsible, identify what your goals and objectives are, start with the end in mind in order to best determine what you're going to use for structure, but also your goals and objectives will help you to determine how you're going to do things, whether it's deductions for taxes or whether it's where you're going to place your assets, because your goals and things do make a difference. So I know there's so many individuals out there that are like, hey, I listen to this thing and an LLC is what I need to do. Well, maybe. And I know people like to just hear, hey, this is the answer for everybody. But the bottom line is, my whole point of this episode is I want people to realize that you've got to take responsibility. You got to become aware. Every situation is a little different. It's not as complicated as everyone feels, but it does take some strategy. it takes some strategy to begin with the end in mind, have, an awareness and a conscious awareness of your tax planning, and put together a blueprint, put together a plan that makes sense and makes sense for you. And that plan can change, right, Don? I mean, it's not like you have to try to forecast what you're going to need in a year or two. I think a lot of people do that, don't they? It's like, well, I'm going to end up having a ton of properties and a ton of this and that, so I should form a bunch of LLCs right now or this or that. This plan that you're talking about in these three key areas, they can shift and change as you and your wealth change, right?
And not only can they, but they will. Let's be frank. Marriages don't always last, and the divorces happen, people pass away, and life evolves, and your estate plan will evolve. Your tax situation will involve, from the time your kids are little, to the time that you're an empty nester. Life is going to change. And that's why we're not looking for the perfect strategy for any one person. We really are here to teach strategies, because life is going to change. It's like a chess game. There's no one way to win at chess. We're here to teach strategies that, as life changes, as the tax code changes, as lawsuits become more prevalent, and which I think in this COVID-19, I think they will. I think they'll become a lot more prevalent as people get desperate and look for more ways to make money. They're going to look at anybody that has assets, but regardless, life will change. And I don't know anybody that teaches this better on a more basic level than what we do at the Asset Protection Summit would. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that the point that really resonates with people that I've been around is that, in success in life and personal development and financial education, it's never about the destination, it's about the journey. And it's not about your vehicle, it's not about your business, it's not about your thing. It's about your mindset of how you approach things. And the goal for this podcast was to help people to realize that when you approach the mindset of estate planning, tax strategies, and asset protection a certain way, then it's going to evolve. It's going to change and it can grow. And too many people are worried about what's going to happen or what they're going to need. And that's why they're not starting the opportunities they want. They're not taking advantage of tax benefits or structure. So I really, really like that. And I wish we had more time, but one of the things I want to be able to do is bring you back on, every few weeks, and we can hit a topic, because I like how one of the things you'll do, in fact, we do have a special gift for everyone listening to the episode. We do have a copy of the Total Asset Protection ebook, which gives a little bit different perspective. It actually approaches this topic from an asset category, like protecting your residence or protecting your brokerage account or protecting your small business. So I really love this, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes for this episode. If you'd like a free copy of this asset protection ebook provided by Protect Wealth, go to the show notes and click on that link and we'll get it. But this has been a really, really good strategic overview of something I think is critical. I'm a big believer of personal development, big believer of financial education, and then obviously business and entrepreneurship. So Don, thank you for your time, and this has been very, very helpful, and I look forward to some more stuff as well. Is there any final thoughts that you have to be able to leave listeners with, or any other specific thoughts that you feel like they ought to take into consideration, or do you feel like we've covered the high level?
No, I think that's the big thing. The most important thing is that we take responsibility. These principles are basic. I know legal and tax, oh my gosh, it overwhelms people, but it doesn't have to. There are some simple, basic principles. The rook moves forward this way. The knight moves this way. Once we understand those basic principles, asset protection and tax strategies just become part of our overall life. They're not that complicated, and we encourage you to take advantage of what George just offered. But it is about personal responsibility in my mind.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, listen, that's all the time we have today, guys. So get in the show notes, get a copy of that ebook. Also, if you are interested in going to the 3-day summit, hit me up at the Daily Mastermind on Instagram or Facebook. I'll let you know whether or not you qualify to go or whether it's the right thing for you. But more than happy to help you with that. So let's get you over, get that ebook, study these concepts, and start learning them. I hope you'll take a minute and you'll start to take more personal responsibility for your financial wealth, because I know it will affect your health, wealth, happiness, and everything else. if you'll do this, because how you do anything is how you do everything in life. So anyway, that's our episode for today. Everybody have an amazing day. This is George Wright III, and this has been the Daily Mastermind. Have an amazing day.